Today, as you might notice from the title, we're going to discuss energy. While the MK Ultra Studios are being given their yearly spruce up. It's taking 3 days to cut down all the shit back there, so got a little bit of extra fodder behind me. Energy. Raise your hand if you chose oil. Raise your hand if you chose electricity. Raise your hand if you chose coal-burning plants. Raise your hand if you chose nuclear power. No one has their hands up. That's weird. But we have preferences about what power we use and what energy we use, and we fight wars over it. You know, I think we could make a drinking game out of this show, out of any one of the episodes, but definitely Deep Thoughts. Deep Thoughts, where we talk about being duped. If you took a drink every time you heard the concept of the word, you've been duped. You'd be very drunk in this episode, for one thing. Here's the deal. We have been completely brainwashed to believe that we chose various forms of energy and that we're gonna fight for it. We're gonna fight for coal over nuclear. We're gonna fight nuclear over coal. We're gonna fight for windmills and solar panel farms and one shitty resource after another. We're not going to teach our kids about Nikola Tesla, who built an antenna starting in 1917, which harvested energy right out of ether. They said ether doesn't exist. Okay, when the physicists like Einstein came around, they said ether doesn't exist because we simply don't have the intellectual capacity to figure out what the fuck it is. But Tesla built an entire power generator based on it. For anybody who says ether doesn't exist, go fuck yourself. It exists. It can be metabolized. It's what the fucking pyramids do. We can reach into the universe to get infinite power. Tesla also figured out that the center of the earth is a big giant plasma core. And he reached down inside that well of energy in Colorado after he built this massive Tesla coil. He put a minuscule amount of energy down into the earth's crust and had a standing lightning bolt for 60 seconds come back out of the earth. The dude completely figured it out, and that's why they don't teach you about where energy actually exists in the universe. We're going to keep this one real, as we always do. Filter out the kiddies, you know. Now, there's two kinds of energy that we really recognize here in this world. There's electron-based electricity, whether it be stimulated by photons on a valence of metal, conductive metal. And then there's just concussive turbine turning, which is usually cannibalized to make electrons, right? You put gasoline in your car. Well, the combustion engine, well, unfortunately, most of them to this day, still run on just the pistons being pushed up and down. But because we have something that's being propelled by an explosive liquid, we can steal some of the rotation off that using a belt system to then grab electricity off the belt by turning something that's going to actually have a capacitor inside to make alternating current or even direct current for the car you're in. So it powers your radio, powers your alternator to recharge up the battery. So we can use a fuel to make electricity, or we can use straight up any sort of concussion. A windmill, right, is a windmill that turns due to wind, and it turns inside itself a little alternating current engine. Or you can make it direct if you want. I think everything's AC at this point. Hydroelectric. You have an amazing waterfall. Well, water's falling. Kinetic energy transfer straight to the ground. Well, you hit a bunch of turbines instead of just hitting the ground, and boom, you metabolize that up right into electricity. There are these big walls off the coast of England and Scotland, as a matter of fact, where it's one of the most brilliantly simple, if you think about it, minimalistic way, beautiful apparatus where the waves that come in and push, against the coast, they've built these giant walls, and these walls actually metabolize up electricity, right? So electricity, we have some options that we're going to get into. But the way that we actually think about metabolizing electricity in our mind is usually as a unit of, takes a lot of energy to make some electricity occur, and then you use it up as a packet, and you go back to the power company and you buy a packet, and you have to buy it from somebody, and it's very complex to make, and that's the sort of the bullshit ecosystem in your brain of electricity. And Eric Dollard has done a brilliant job going back again to the 1800s and even some documents in the 1700s and rekindled this entire thing about free energy, zero-point energy systems to get you out of this bad ecosystem. Energy's free. We can tap into the universe and grab it. And honestly, we couldn't possibly use as much as we could get very instantaneously as demonstrated by Tesla. So the other forms of energy are those liquid energies. Something that's going to explode, essentially, cause force. This will be the episode where I get into Stan Meyers, or Stanley Meyers. Meyers is his last name. Oil. Oil. It's the bane of humanity's existence. I mean, I'm not going to repeat in full, but I will give you just a footnote. Guess this is the first episode you've ever seen. You know, all the currencies in the world are value off the sale of a barrel of oil. You can call it the petrodollar, oil-backed currencies, whatever you want to call it. Oil has been randomly picked because we've built a gigantic system that relies on it. You know, oil lubricates our engines, which we don't need to do. Oil is the combustible material in most engines, which we can change from. Oil makes plastics. Oil makes medicine, right? Aspirin, was it Bayer aspirin, is made from a derivative of oil, right? Not just Bayer, but I guess most aspirin. I'm not sure how that works, but oil's everywhere. It's in everything. And I'm not sure humanity is actually ready to not have everything made out of plastic, you know. Now, there's some secrets about oil that I want to share with you, because I went on a huge pilgrimage about 10 years ago, and I went on it for a couple years. Now, you will have heard your whole life, if you're 40 or over, that there's all these caches of oil all over the world. And they simply don't report that the caches are there for, well, actually, they don't report for two reasons. One, if you splash the world with a bunch of oil, then the amount of money it would take to buy some oil would be nothing, right? So the economy would crash all around the world because all of our currency is fake and backed by nothing. Consequently, the elite of the world would lose all their power as well. So they conceal gigantic stashes of oil. And again, there's three that I always talk about on the show. And these are from the VP of BP, British Petroleum. I got this 1 degree away from one of the head dogs at British Petroleum. Off the coast of Scotland is a massive reserve, maybe one of the largest. And when we say massive, we're talking about Saudi Arabia and the Eurasian oil supplies prior to drilling. When you have a stash that huge, getting it out of the ground is not that hard. You poke a hole, you don't need a drill or a pump, and it just comes blasting out just due to the natural attrition of force inside the bowels of the earth. The other one is off northern Alaska. So if you have Alaska, that we always think about in America as the coast that reaches out across the bottom because we think that the rest of it's uninhabited. And it pretty much is. But on the other side of the top north side, that's where our big Saudi Arabia level cache is. The other huge one is off the coast of Brazil. And they tried to tap into it, and their guy said, I'm gonna make Brazil the most first world country on planet Earth. We're spending every dime to make this world better. And they got rid of his ass and put an IMF executive shill chick in his place. And the place has been in fucking turmoil ever since. Venezuela is a nice small one, but it's pretty damn huge and pretty amazing. And they killed Chavez because Chavez said he would give it away for $50 a barrel for 200 years. They irradiated the guy, got pancreatic cancer, and nothing flat, and he was dead. Okay. The second reason why they don't report these stashes, other than devaluing their crappy currency, is because they have to immediately pay taxes on it. Now, that's the stupidest, most ridiculous bunch of bullshit, but they needed to create some phantom pressures on people to keep them from reporting oil. And the International Monetary Fund, as directed by the World Bank, invented this international taxation system to say, fine, you report it, you got to pay taxes on it, and if you report it and don't pay taxes on it, we'll get these blue helmet UN guys to come and fuck you over. It's just a repression mechanism to make sure that nobody shows their oil cards. It's so they can keep power over us. So I want you to spread all those locations to your friends. And I have to conceal the exact VP at British Petroleum, but I guarantee you it came 100% wrapped in a gift of utter certainty that this person told about those locations. And I'm telling you right now, other than the one from Scotland and that I never hear any action about, Brazil, you've seen action. Alaska, you've seen action. And Venezuela, you've seen action. When people try to get this oil, and it always gets shut down. Okay, let's talk about oil. What I'm about to tell you is something you're not going to believe. And I have friends that are millionaires due to oil. But they couldn't tell you what's inside an atom. They don't know anything about protons, electrons, neutrons. But they'll have problems with this theory because it hurts their little hearts. But it's true. Oil is a natural byproduct of the earth. It is not a fossil fuel by any fucking stretch of the imagination. Okay? Let me just give you one little sentient fact about oil. And then let's go through how it's created. Oil exists as far down as man has ever been able to drill into the mantle of earth. We're at 36,000 feet 10 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, and there's still oil down there. Huge amounts of oil. All living things in recorded history stop at 16,000 feet. So less than half the distance down to where we find oil, all life ceases to exist. Any sort of fossilized trilobite, anything, bacterial, there's nothing down there at 35,000 feet. And yet we find infinite oil down there. The vector of pressure from the center of the earth is always up and out, never down. So if you're thinking stuff drip down to the center of the earth, it doesn't work like that, okay? The earth creates oil because it has an ecosystem relationship with the sun and the universe. Crude oil is nothing more than compressed methane gas. Let's review atomically what we're talking about here. Methane gas, a methane particle is one carbon in the center, binding 4 hydrogen together. Hydrogen, we know, is extremely volatile. It explodes. Crude oil has an inverse relationship, more carbon than hydrogen, because methane is a gas and crude oil is this black sludge. The reason why it's black is because it has lots of carbon in it. Now, anyone who's taken chemistry and studied the conversion of gas to liquid has come to the grips with the fact that you must compress the living shit out of it with something to turn it into a liquid. The center of the earth, or I shouldn't say the center, but at least the crust, layers of the earth, compress methane gas using carbon atoms. And that's why the inverse happens. More carbon, less hydrogen. Still has a shit ton of hydrogen in it, but it's basically made of those two components. There's an infinitesimal fraction of a percent that has oxygen in it, which is where the Rockefellers walked in 1893 to the Geneva Convention and got it falsely categorized as a fossil fuel. When you refine crude oil, my family's in oil, okay? You boil it, and you boil off the carbon atoms, or the carbon molecules in the composition of it. The heavier shit's at the bottom, and the lighter stuff's at the top of a giant pipe. Okay? They siphon off high-octane fuels off the top, and they sludge off shit like diesel fuel towards the bottom, which burns really black sooty because it still has a shit ton of its carbon signature in it. Longer it boils, the more goes to the top, and you have refined gasolines of all kinds of different kerosene, regular car gasoline, jet fuel, everything. They're simply getting it back to its methane original state. But it's never going to quite get to the methane gas state. I mean, shit's going to boil off the top, and they're going to burn it from oil refineries, if you've seen Blade Runner or driven by Long Beach. But the earth creates this shit automatically. And you might think, well, where does it get its supply? Well, one, the Earth's a big goddamn place, okay? And we merely metabolize the oil out into soot that goes back down to Earth. But it doesn't get down to the bowels. Now, remember what I told you about Earth expanding, right? Earth has a gigantic plasma furnace in the center, not nickel. Because of the relationship with the sun is made out of helium and hydrogen, and the rest is a bunch of derivatives of carbon and oxygen. There's actually oxygen in the spectrum of light when we look at the coronal mass ejections from the sun. So the same exact infinitesimal amount of oxygen that's in crude oil is in the sun's surface as well. Now the sun is a gigantic plasma ball of shit boiling on the outside. And when it creates a little swivel hole in there, you get to see inside the bowels of the sun, which are completely black. But we gain atomic matter from the sun in unspent subatomic particles. When things explode, we grab our gravity well of our planet will grab that stuff and pull it inside. Remember, when you look at atomic matter, there's a lot of space between atomic matter, and there's forces that hold shit together. Well, there's a lot of methodologies for space particles to be assimilated by our planet. But we don't necessarily need any extra stuff to create the stuff on Earth. And we are consuming it probably faster than the world is actually creating it, to be honest. So it is getting harder to get out of the ground. When they started drilling oil was floating on the state of Texas. I mean, you just drive around and there's black soot, crude oil just floating. When you see these old movies of dinosaurs, and dinosaurs are walking by, tar pits and stuff, well, that's what we used to have. Just in the 1800s, 1830s, when the Standard Oil Company was formed by the Rockefellers. Now, the Rockefellers couldn't raise the rate, the cost of gasoline until they got it falsely, I always want to say ratified, but falsely categorized as a fossil fuel. Now, some people will say, oh, that's horseshit, man. We take plants and they die and they rot directly down into crude oil. Well, it's not exactly the same shit, for one thing. But two, life on Earth is an ecosystem of the same subatomic particles that we all live off of, right? We are carbon-based life forms. Carbon is a giant part of crude oil. We know that biomatter that deteriorates turns into methane gas. That is where they blame the oceans for a lot of the CO2 emissions, right? That's why the shitter, when Mexico City has bad sewer pipes, blows up and destroys a bunch of streets in Mexico City. It's the biomatter out of mankind that turns back into methane gas. We are made of the same stuff. It doesn't mean it's all created the same way. Now, I found the formula that this guy had said, look, in 1979, the oil companies figured out this whole thing. Now, maybe they figured out a lot sooner than that. But this guy said, here's the formula right here. And I swear to God, I should have screen captured the page. I don't know why I fearlessly thought I could get back to this page, but I have not been able to find it ever since. If any of you can find it, there's a guy out there. The website was like yellow. So I can say it was a yellow page, and the guy had printed the entire atomic formula for the natural metabolism of the plates of Earth crushing methane gas into crude oil. The whole translation algorithm and everything. It was gorgeous. So why mention that? Well, one, we need to stop saying it's a fossil fuel. All these peak oil people, all right, we got plenty of oil to draw out of the ground to keep oil on top. But we don't want that shit, right? We need to get something going that's would be an initiative that would be a 0-point energy initiative. So let's take this whole carbon taxation fucking bullshit, this global warming bullshit. Let's review my previous episodes. Here's the situation, people. Carbon taxation is being turned on to reduce world population. How does that relate? Well, it's going to cost you a shit ton of money to exist on this planet. We're going to continue using shitty power sources like nuclear power, which if you live 72 years, you will have created a ping pong ball size of water that'll take 9 million years to drink safely. Okay? That's not a Masonic hand gesture, just so you know. That's the nuclear ping pong ball thing. Coal, which they managed to clean up a lot of the emissions. Well, there's a limited amount of coal, even though there is a ton of it. We have alternatives. But this whole thing, this whole fucking green movement, right? Every green group on the planet's been completely co-opted, all right? But the whole thing is based on shitty energy systems that are polluting the world and all this other crap. My fucking mailbox once a year fills up with a metric ton of fucking shit. I don't need that crap. Unsolicited bullshit catalogs I have nothing to do with. They just mail it to me and say resident on there. Cry me a fucking river that you care about the planet, because I know your mailbox is full of the same shit. The United States Postal Service just is up to a $53 billion debt in this country. Shut their fucking asses down. You want to ship something? You're going to pay to fucking ship it. How about $10 to ship something? UPS, FedEx, $10. Oh, you don't want to pay $10? Well, maybe you just keep that bullshit to yourself, you know? Nobody fucking cares, really, about this planet who's screaming about carbon taxation. Carbon taxation is going to make your electric bill, it's $50, be $450. They're going to penalize you for having more than one child. They're going to penalize you for using your car and not an electric car. I mean, the ones that are automated that are coming into LA. And hell, maybe it's going to be cool and fun. Shit, man. It's kind of like Uber with no driver. Johnny Cab, right? Here's why. Here's your proof that no one really gives a fuck about the planet. There is not a single country that I am aware of. There's not a single corporation that I'm aware of. There's not a single military branch that I'm aware of that studies and tries to find a zero-point energy system. The Patent Office has been told that if anyone walks in the room and claims they have a zero-point energy system, you're to say it is an impossibility. Remember the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers flew in 1903. But they got cock-blocked. They even took a photograph of this plane 43 feet in the air in 1903. But the Air Force was trying to create planes before the Wright brothers filed their patent so they wouldn't have to pay two kids for the patent. So they told the patent office to tell the kids that flight is impossible. For 4 years, they kept perfecting, and the Air Force, just a bunch of, at the time, bunch of scumbags, sending all these infiltrators trying to steal their wing designs, trying to steal everything for 4 years. Meanwhile, this guy was really the Navy, but this guy kept trying to make planes, and he kept flopping. All those videos you see of shitty planes falling apart, those are a lot of them are the Navy planes that they were trying to make, trying to outdo the Wright brothers. The crazy double, triple decker ones, those are just individuals being crazy. But the ones that are pushed off into water are usually the naval ones. So the Wright brothers got smart and sent one of them over to Paris. He flies the plane over there. They're like, flight is possible, patent in France, fuck you, America. You didn't honor your American citizens. We're doing it now, just instantaneously. Oh, but now the Air Force, or Navy, pining to be an Air Force, of course, there's no planes. What the hell am I talking about? They pull out this photograph in 1903 in the Kitty Hawk flight, and they say, no, look, we've had it for 4 years ahead of you. And finally, the Wright brothers got their just desserts, right? Zero-point energy systems are not allowed currently right now. Now, here's the catch. I just said I don't know of any groups that are doing it. This should be an initiative in every major country around the world. Japan, Germany, especially Germany, these crazy fucking engineers, right? America, everywhere, China. Everyone should be trying to make a zero-point energy system. But no one is. But yet that's the problem, right? Shitty energy systems are spewing stuff into the sky, and you're not supposed to procreate because of it. Why aren't we even trying? We don't teach children in school about Tesla. We have a car company named after the fucking guy. There's a rock band named after the guy. But no one they just think this is some Latin fucking word that came out of nowhere. Now you take a child who's 3 years old and you start teaching the principles of electronics, the principles of gravity, the principles of ether, the principles of all things, electric, combustion, force, physics, and you'll have a solution by the time the kid's probably 15 years old. And the kid will be elated to know this information. Take it from a kid who learned all the other indoctrination and not the good stuff, right? Had my uncle taught me, because he was also indoctrinated, but had he taught me about Tesla and electricity instead of quantum mechanics and general relativity, who knows? Maybe I could have come up with something for you, But we're not even trying. Common Core? Are you fucking kidding me? That stuff's ever going to teach a kid anything decent? Not going to happen. So when someone starts talking to you about green bullshit and about how you're bad or this or someone else is bad for this crap, just stop them in their fucking tracks and go, did you choose electricity? Did you choose oil? Coal? Did you choose all these things? No, you didn't. And you know who did? The bankers that profit from it. That's the fucking kicker. And what the bankers are doing right now on planet Earth is guilt-tripping the fucking planet who has to pay into their shitty systems, their shitty choices for alternate energy, so that we rebuild their fucking grid and give it right to them. We're building a gigantic fucking cash machine. Forget about carbon taxation. That's an Al Gore scam off to the side to feed them taxes for existing. More draconian bullshit, right? Well, we're going to rebuild whatever energy systems out there, and we're going to give all the profits to them. We're going to take our tax money and our labor, and we're going to give all the monies to these corporations. Just think about it. When has anyone come to your house and said, we're going to build that big giant nuclear power plant down the street, and you're going to get a kickback check from it? Nope. Some of you have solar panels on top of your house, and you get a little bit of reprieve from your bill, and that's cool. Unfortunately, those units are per capita of their size versus the amount of power they generate. It's bullshit technology. Trust me, we can do way better than that. But I want to thank every one of you for doing it in the meantime, because you are helping out the system and you are showing everyone that an alternate system can exist. It's sort of like a stepping stone to something good. But here's the thing we need to step off to isn't being created, isn't being talked about. People like Eric Dollard are being chastised because he at one point in his life, he was down and out, and I don't know where he is today. He could be down and out today, but at one point in his life, he was down and out, and he took some drugs. And then he admitted it during an interview, and then it was, that he's a big meth user. He bragged on this interview about how much he could take and how much he remained in control of his life. In last bunch of interviews I saw of him, he doesn't take it anymore. But this guy is unraveling the past in the future so we could take a look at it. Almost like the treasure map of knowledge to get back to where we need to be. So the first argument is, we didn't choose this energy. We got to find out what it is. Now I'm going to tell you a personal story of mine. I've told it on the show before, but it's a million years ago, and I didn't get a chance to just get into the total details. Here in Southern California, I had breakfast with the gentleman who owned most of the town that we're in. Okay. Coastal town, a very wealthy town. He was extremely wealthy. He created an investment banking house and sold it to J.P. Morgan. Guy didn't drive with a license plate on his fucking car. The cops never touched him. The building that we were in eating breakfast every morning, he owned. And I met him because some friends of mine knew him and they knew me, and they said, you two guys are very fucking intense and you're very smart and you guys need to meet each other. And so we immediately met. Again, it was almost like my writing mentor. He sat me down and goes, what can I do for you? And I was like, I don't know. People think we should talk. And he goes, well, tell me about yourself. And I went, boom, 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 boom. And he's like, cool, let's eat breakfast tomorrow. This went on for about a year. And this guy told me some interesting stuff. All of his kids graduated from Harvard because he had the money to put them through. He said, look, the world's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better. That's a guarantee. And he says, I want your type to survive. So he goes, one thing he said is start taking colloidal silver. Stop taking antibiotics. I thought, whoa, that's fucking weird. He didn't really push through too many health regimens, but that was one of his big ones. He took it himself. And he said, we got into this subject of zero-point energy systems once. He says, it's really funny. He goes, when I owned my investment banking house, which put money into various ventures, he said we had at least 7 people that had discovered how to create energy out of the universe for free. And some of them built cars out of it. Some of them just left them as generators to take their houses off the grid. And he goes, they came to us looking for money. And he goes, here's the way the system works. He says, we earmark them as one of these guys. And then we get rid of them. A lot of times they would drive their fancy car from the Midwest and drive it to the coast, and then they would die on the way back. Sometimes they would just croak in their sleep. Everything was accidented. Everything was natural. No investigations of any kind. And the amount of rewards that they could get at his level for getting rid of one of these guys that would crack the oil system completely apart and get rid of the money that's based on it was huge, right? Stan Meyers, which we're about to go into, was murdered in 1998 by drinking some poisoned cranberry juice, as his family reports. Again, he's eating dinner with his family, sips a bit of this stuff, holds his throat, tells his family, they got me. Runs outside. I don't know why the fuck you run outside when you're poisoned, but then he fell on his face and died. Okay. Well, regardless of the details, he died. He was poisoned. They said it was food poisoning, the official story. Here's what Stan figured out. Stan was a farmer, not an engineer. But Stan figured out, and Stan knew that there's a lot of hydrogen in water, right? Hydrogen, H2O, right? So he said, look, I can get hydrogen out of fucking water. I know I can, and we can just burn hydrogen inside of a car in replace of gasoline. He goes, we have just tanks of water that fracture this stuff and get the hydrogen out. Now, if you listen to fuel cell people, the way that they've masked this whole thing is to say, oh, it doesn't work like that. You can't do it. It takes an amazing amount of energy to fracture out hydrogen out of water. So this fuel cell technology, where it's essentially like a big Swiss cheese plate that happens to let the hydrogen molecules move to one side after it's capacitated with electricity. Shit technology, okay, people? Shit in all capitals. Fuel cell is a fucking scam to make sure you never find out how Stan Meyers did it, but I'm going to tell you how Stan Meyers did it. Stan Meyers ran on tap water. Tap water is full of a bunch of weird shit, right? It's not really in the NASA way of doing it. It's not clean enough to be turned into a fuel cell additive to pull out the hydrogen. But here's what he did. First thing he did was he created a piping system where he had two pipes inside of each other, almost like pipe organ pipes, right? So take a big one, a gauge of like an inch and a half, and then put an inch one inside the center. So you have two inside each other. He oscillated between the two the frequency of hydrogen, which I believe is 4,092, somewhere in there, 98 or something like that. What he did was he took a water molecule and oscillated it so it was the shape, the resonance, the shape of like a rice, whatever the fuck you call those rice beans, right? And then he zapped the shit out of it right through the center, pulling out the hydrogen. The ratio of power that his first sample machine was able to conquer was 650 amps of power for half an amp going in. And even though if you look at his demo machines, he has big giant generators, he's not using anything from those generators, just a tiny infinitesimal amount. So half an amp or half a watt was creating 650. So half a unit was creating 650 units. Massive, no energy in, massive energy out. So that was just his little experiment. And the patent office, again, told him that what you're creating is a technical impossibility. You cannot take less energy and make more energy out of it. He's like, the fuck I can. So they said, prove it. He built this machine, brought it down to the patent office, turns it on inside the room. And this is when people could smoke inside the office in the early 90s. This thing starts bubbling up all this hydrogen immediately. He's got a burper on it. It's totally safe. The guy's not an idiot. But the patent office guy, runs down the hallway telling everyone to put out their cigarettes because now we have a bunch of hydrogen in this tank. Of course, everything was fine, and he files his patent and starts the process of getting it. He realized that was just a demo machine. So here's what this guy did. I'm just going to go straight to the jugular of what he actually came up with. I've talked about it a couple times on the show. He looked at a combustion engine, and he said, well, in the mid-50s, we figured out we could treat metal with an oil derivative, and you would never have to ever put oil in a crankcase. So the whole idea is you're going to put oil in your car to keep all the metal lubricated. He goes, that problem was solved in the mid-50s. He talked about the exact study. Look up Stan Meyers' town hall meeting, and you'll hear him talk about exactly the folks that pulled that off. Second tier of it all, what is he said, look, how does an engine work? There's a valve that lets in a little bit of air. There's another valve that lets in some gasoline out of the carburetor injection system. And there's a spark plug that lights it on fire. When it explodes, it pushes down a piston, right? That's what a normal combustion engine does. He said, fine, I'm going to take out the spark plug and I'm going to shut off this valve that brings in some gasoline because I'm going to have just the valve of air and my little replacement unit. He built these things. He was selling these things for $1,500 per car. So people want to call him a scam. He delivered this to people's cars. His car ran off of it. He built several cars that ran on it. A VW van and a dune buggy. When people said he was hiding fuel in his VW van fenders, he built a dune buggy. He said, look, the whole thing's on the outside of this dune buggy pipes. None of the pipes are perforated. There's no concealment whatsoever. And he goes, he drove across the United States on 3 gallons of tap water, 3.5 gallons or something like that, right? The way the system worked was that you unplugged the spark plug. You plugged in his new unit. Tap water's coming out of a gas tank. Tap water comes down to his unit. It's fractured exactly like I told you. Now, here's the interesting part. They found out later by looking through his obfuscated schematics that he had actually hid a fact of how his unit worked, and it was utterly brilliant. And there's videos upon videos upon videos of he and his brother and all of his buddies working out the electrical injection system to make this thing work before he sold it. 75% of the power to push down the piston was the fracturing process. So just splitting that rice bead of water provided 75% of the pressure to push the piston down. The other 25% was actually combusting the hydrogen in the chamber. But the guy did it. Tap water ran a car. With that technology, you could run a turbine jet engine. Instant replacement for oil and all combustible engines across the world. They came to him and offered him $1.1 billion for the technology to shut him up. He told him to go to hell, thought he was protected by angels, and they poisoned him and killed him. Why his family didn't go after the whole thing was probably just out of sheer intimidation. They don't want to die. They saw their brother die, and they realize it's just a matter of time before they get rid of us. Plus, it would take hundreds of millions of dollars to really ramp up a company. And where are you going to get that money? You're going to go to my friends' investment banking houses or venture capital places, and they're going to put you down. It's all self-controlled. It's been controlled forever. Now, there's I want to clarify one thing about him. So if you go study him, and especially if you read Wikipedia, which is a fucking, Wikipedia is designed to assassinate your fucking brain. That's what it's all about. The fucking nerds that run that site are the biggest bunch of assholes you've ever met in your fucking life, right? They have a massive amount of double standards, okay? And I'll tell you a couple experiences in 1 second. But if you read about Stan Meyers, they say that he was sued successfully and lost a lawsuit in the early 90s because he was a fraud. That lawsuit was based on a deadline that he gave an investor that he borrowed money from. He did not have his technology provable by the time the deadline rolled over. So the guy decided to go ahead and call him a fraud, took him to court, and the court asked him, does your technology work? And he said, well, sort of, but it doesn't meet the specs of the contract I signed with this guy when I borrowed the money. So he lost the lawsuit to that guy, was deemed a fraud, but he's not a fraud. Because by the time 1998 rolled around, he was selling this thing. And you can see videos of him putting these in cars. If they haven't wiped them all off the fucking web. That's a guy who cared about humanity. Unfortunately, he was religious and got himself in some trouble without taking some precautions. I'm not sure that there's anything he could have done. Because the United States government, military, police all answer to the same people. Whether or not they know it or not, right? They're not bad people, but they answer to the same forces. And they would just tell some story about him molesting children or something, and someone would take him down, even if it's just a private little hit. They do whatever they need to do to get rid of a guy who's going to get rid of the entire economy of the world and rebuild it up under sovereign cash. Wikipedia. Let's just give you one little thing. I have friends that are in the music business, and they're very famous, like very famous. And they come to me every once in a while to do crazy shit for them. We manage their business. We write the bylaws. We even write the the code of conduct for the tours together. Because I've done it for, God, I guess 6 or 7 years now. I know the touch points, right? But they also come to me to update Wikipedia every once in a while. My buddy wrote his autobiography. Just wanted to put it online. That's all I want to do. Go in there and say, this book is available. Here's a link to it. All these nerds swarm out of nowhere saying that I've put in some profit-bearing thing and that Wikipedia doesn't fucking allow that. I link them off to the Rolling Stones Wikipedia, which must have had 150 to 500 fucking profit-bearing items on that goddamn sheet. So there's a huge double standard on that site. All the bullshit stuff we hear about chemtrails that are trying to offshoot it off to normal things, it all comes out of Wikipedia. Yeah. If they're reporting on nothing, then you're going to find truth. If it's just a chemistry formula or a mathematical equation, it'll be right because it can't be wrong. But when it comes up to something like science, it's all a bunch of Neil deGrasse Tyson misdirection bullshit. 0 point energy. Let's talk about geothermal plants before we close this out because I'm going to lose my light here pretty soon. Geothermal plants were invented by Caltech in the 50s for the United States military when the huge scare of nuclear war, which may be a complete bunch of bullshit in the first place, but when that scare came around, they were worried that they were going to lose the power grid system in America. Caltech is the most prestigious technical school in the entire planet. MIT comes second. So they said, look, what do we do to make power in this world, right? We use sheer force of like water falling on turbines, but we can also boil water and turn turbines. That's what nuclear power plants do. All right, so if we can boil water, we can turn a turbine. If we can turn a turbine, we can make electricity. Well, where is there a natural source of heat in the world? Oh, yeah, volcanoes. Volcanoes make a shit ton of heat. Even if you don't see it on the top, it's still hot down below in the mantle. And because the Earth's crust has, varying levels of density, that's why volcanoes exist. It's just one of those little areas where it's weaker. That's how Hawaii exists. Hawaii's making a new island, believe it or not. Not the people, but the Earth is barfing out a new island. It'll be the new island that everyone can go to in 4 or 5 million years, right? Buy your tickets now. So essentially what the Caltech said was we're going to drill pipes, closed-in test tube pipes, straight down to the mantle of where it gets extremely hot. But the metal will be strong enough to withstand the heat. And we got 2 choices. We can put turbines down inside the soil and turn it down there and route the electricity up. Or we can put water down there in a big U-shaped pipe, pump the water down cold, comes up steaming hot, turns the turbine somewhere in the altitude of this pipe, creates electricity. Then we re-metabolize the water as it cools off back down inside the pipe, and it goes in an infinite loop. And that's how Caltech designed it, and that's how Caltech gave it to the government back in the day. But the oil companies said, holy shit, you can't fucking talk about this kind of stuff. One geothermal plant properly built can power the entire world 4,000 times more than it needs on a daily basis. You heard me correct. One plant can generate 4,000 times the amount of electricity that the entire planet consumes second to second. That's pretty good energy generation. Now, we would never create one plant to run the whole world because it could have problems. So we'll build 4 or 5 per continent and we'll be good. But the oil companies came in and usurped that and used Wikipedia to pass around their shit technology. They took the pipes that go down to the mantle and they cut them. So they're wide open. So all the horrible toxic fumes that are down there by that mantle, sulfuric acid, all kinds of crazy poisons. Now all that shit's coming back up to the surface. And if you listen to blowhards about geothermal, they'll say, it's really dangerous and, we're trying to figure out how to keep the gases from the internals of the earth coming up, and we got to deal with them and offshoot them and store them and then pump them back down. That wasn't the original design. Anybody who's seen a test tube in Chemistry 1 knows what the fuck what they were doing. You put shit in a closed tube, you put a heat on the bottom, and boom, it boils. Christ. It's fucking elementary design. It's just brilliant elementary design out of Caltech. All right? And I had this particular piece of information shared with me by a guy who doesn't believe in a single conspiracy on planet Earth. But he said, look, the design's been changed by the oil companies to make sure that it looks like bad technology. Boom, right in my head explodes, and I went and researched it and found out it was correct. All right. That's a 0 point energy system. That gets us off oil. That gets us off nuclear power. That gets us off coal. There's absolutely no toxic byproduct we have to figure out how to bury in the ground. Oklahoma had over 580 earthquakes last year? It's in the Midwest. Now, it could be fracking. There's real theories about how fracking can create huge earthquakes. Could be expanding Earth. Could be that the Earth's getting ready for a huge pop. Maybe that's the way it happens. We're not even trying, people. They now have hydrogen cars. Why do they have hydrogen cars? Because they can create the hydrogen just like they do gas and put it in a pump, and you got to pay to put it in your car. And then it's hydrogen in the tank, which is dangerous as hell. It's dangerous to pump hydrogen into your car. Stanley Meyers, tap water. Boom. Everything that's created is created at the actual cylinder. When it blows up, it's water and it comes out the back. No oil for the crankcase because we're going to use that old technology to lubricate the steel for its entire lifetime. Tesla. We hadn't even talked about trying to get back into Tesla's technology. His stuff was sabotaged within 10 years of his antenna. So 1917, 1927, his big giant tower was created, and he goes, look, I'm gonna not only create electricity the exact same way the Egyptians did, but we're going to broadcast it in low frequency to people's homes, and then we're going to remetabolize it up into high frequency at the house. So no one's going to suffer any leukemia with the stuff traveling through the air. Nothing will have to have wires. There'll be no outlets in your house. Cool, right? Tesla's laboratory is documented by Mark Twain, who I always forget his real name. That's his writing name, right? But they used to go down to his laboratory and watch him do these crazy shows. And they said, look, what was weird is none of the equipment in his laboratory had any wires. He said there was light up in the ceiling, but there were no lights up there. He simply had something that projected electricity up there and metabolized it to combust in a small way that it created a glow. So like what's going on inside of a neon tube? He just had it up there in the sky, and it was pure electrons. So it consumed itself. This guy was so unbelievably brilliant. He was a true Superman of intelligence. Now you're going to hear about Einstein a lot because Einstein concealed ether. Einstein got us off on a bunch of things that are interesting but don't really change the way the world works besides giving us nuclear bombs to blow the living shit out of ourselves, right? Nikola Tesla would design machines in his mind. And, you know, some of you might go, oh, okay, well, that's cool. I mean, that's pretty smart. But this guy would age ball bearings in his brain for months. He would roll them in his head, and he would keep track of the general attrition of contact, of friction to see. And he knew how an alloy would deteriorate over time, and so he just kept running it in his brain, trying to figure out whether or not he needed to optimize the machine. He wouldn't build a machine until he had it completely perfected inside of his brain. And then it worked the first day. I mean, for those of you who engineer anything, just that last line should blow your mind to pieces. I can barely run a piece of code that works the first time, right? Getting a little better as I get older. But the first time, it's crazy. This guy completely engulfed himself in front of a trade show, I believe in Paris, in plasma energy, the stuff that's nearly intangible to man at this point. We don't have anything in our households that run on plasma, pure fucking plasma. It doesn't happen. But this guy just lived in it physically. We've lost out. We've lost the brilliance of the 1800s, of all the electricity they had figured out, because they were going for a zero-point energy system from day one, and they achieved it from day one. But we're not allowed to talk about it. I mean, we are, but we're consciously so brainwashed out of it. We're so addicted to bullshit in the world, we don't even get into the conversation to begin with. And we've got to make a change there. So if you want to go down this path a little bit and just study things, your homework is to go research Stan Meyers. It's all over YouTube, man. And if you run into any debunking stuff, just remember he did it. He actually used it himself. He put it in a couple cars before he died. Make sure you look at his lectures, his town hall meeting lectures. Go look up Eric Dollard. We did a whole episode on the guy, but it wasn't 100% dedicated to him. I wish I could do a whole episode on Eric Dollard, but I would lose 99% of you in just the mathematics alone. But this guy, depending on what kind of person you are, this guy has cracked this this veil of deception that we live in today. It's almost like a curtain, like a membrane. He said, this is this propaganda you have in front of you. He goes, look, Just going back to Tesla, Steinmetz, Faraday, Henry, Volta, going back to those guys, you're going to find that these guys had figured it out. With their combined mathematics, with their combined thinking. The ether has been tracked by 2 separate scientists at 50 times the speed of light. Tesla based his antenna off of it that generated electricity. The first Tesla coils. Again, the Tesla coils at opposite, when it was built by Tesla, it did the exact opposite of what we know Tesla coils to be doing today. Today, it capacitates up electricity from the bottom and zaps off the top, and all these college students play, jingle bells with them. Very creative, but it's the exact opposite technology. The big ball on the top is grabbing electricity out of the ether through impact and bringing it down through a wire and capacitating up an infinitesimal low frequency into a high frequency. Now, that was a crude thing that he created. The one he built in Colorado was the real deal. You got to read about that, and again, Eric Dollard has all the old documentation. Eric Dollard's presentations are reading nothing more than the books from the past to you. He's not coming up. He does have his own theories and things, but he really tries to keep his injection down and his studies up. But Tesla was able to convince the Earth to create a circuit. Again, very little in, almost infinite out. We have got to get back to discussing this. We have got to get to the point where if you get into any green conversation, your coup de grace, your bolt cutter to their Achilles heel, is to say, why isn't a single country, corporation, or organization fully dedicated to zero-point energy systems? And your answer is that the Patent Office of the United States of America says it's folklore, that it's impossible to do. So, Now, the truth of the matter is, they have the recipe to do everything, right? The oil companies know exactly how to do what Stan Meyers has done. They know how to do every single point of zero-point energy that exists that we've ever been able to derive out of human flesh. But they keep it coveted and protected. If we could ever coup open the vaults of their establishment, we'd find it. But there are literally thousands of people who've built Stan Meyers' engine in their garage, at least the one with the pipes. I've seen all kinds of videos of people doing it. People just created one pipe with the insert pipe in the middle. So it's 2 pipes inside of each other on a wand with a little bit of power off the back to metabolize up the circuit. And there's a little circuit off screen, okay, that does the little fracturing pulse. And they just put it in a bucket of water. And all of a sudden, all this bubbling hydrogen comes up, and as soon as the hydrogen hits air, it pops. There's people that will build them for you. You can also find the schematics online, depending on what kind of electrician you are. People have taken their houses completely off the grids and had the power company show up and say, what the fuck's going on? How come you're not using any power? They go, we got this Stan Meyers engine in the back. So what's the power company do? They go contact the authorities that you have a volatile gas in your backyard that's not been certified by some non-existent body, so they make you turn it off. Get back on the grid. So these groups get together and they have these town hall meetings, and they tell you how to build the engine, and they say, look, take yourself off the grid just a little bit. Yeah, maybe 2/3 off the grid, but still buy power from them so they don't show up at your house. They show up at your house, say, oh, I just bought energy efficient dishwashers. Carbon taxation. It is the inverse beauty of zero-point energy systems. Zero-point energy systems give us back sovereignty in this planet. They give us control by wiping out the oil companies, by wiping out anybody trying to sell you energy. We should be able to use one geothermal plant for the entire planet until we can get zero-point energy systems that fit inside of a ball bearing. And every single device on planet Earth can just have a little ball bearing. But the elite believe that if you have infinite energy, you're going to screw like bunnies and make a bunch of kids. And that's complete horseshit. Cultural awareness of self slows down procreation. But repression creates children. How does that work? Well, when you have to farm a huge, 2,500 acre lot to pay your bills, you're going to have a lot of kids to help you do that job. That's how it all started. But once you say, look, you don't have to do that anymore. You want to live a nice life, right? Well, you want to have a couple kids because there's a lot of maturity on the other side of having children, and there's a wonderful paycheck, I think, once you become a grandparent. But you don't need 50 kids to pull that off. So they are trying to make it expensive to live. It's not about the atmosphere. Remember, the greenhouse gas layer has 0.054% of a single percent of CO2 in it. 99.9, carry the 9 out, of the materials in the greenhouse gas layer is just water. That's what makes you hot. You all know that already. When it gets sweaty and balmy, you get hot. It happens in California all the time. That's why you go to Lake Havasu and you see it's a dry heat, and it's cool. It's 114, but I'm not dying. It's because it's dry. But if it was wet, you'd be dead. If it was Houston, Texas, you'd be dead. If it was, Miami, Florida, you'd be dead at 114. You'd have to go inside or you'd die of heat exhaustion. It's not because of CO2. It's because of water. So this whole thing of whether or not, global warming, climate change is real or not, and all this, put all these fucking deniers in jail bullshit, that's the one piece of science you need. That's from the head meteorologist at MIT. If you haven't gone, go to mkulturaradio.com. We have a lot more episodes of this type. I think I have an essay on there for global warming. Might want to listen to it. Again, at the site, you have the Normal Talk Show with all the episodes as Deep Thoughts integrated with the Normal Talk Show. Then you have the Deep Thoughts off on its own channel, and then you have essays, and you have Real or Bullshit. We don't make Real or Bullshits anymore, and I don't do essays anymore because I'm videotaping these nowadays. So get up there and triangulate. It's like a gigantic library of knowledge up there. It's not just a talk show where we go back and forth. And the essays are definitely just volumes out of my brain. And I don't mind if you disagree. But don't link me a fucking article off to your bullshit Wikipedia or some derivative thereof, right? Do your own goddamn research. What I said about CO2 in the atmosphere is a fucking fact. It's not something you can debate. And just that fact alone will negate everything you've ever been told. 0-point energy systems is the way to go. And we're not even trying. So let's try. There's some of you listening to me that actually have a knack for electronics and you don't know it. You have a knack for chemistry and you don't know it because you haven't tried. So get out there and try. Maybe you're the next Stan Meyers. Stan Meyers was a farmer, for God's sakes. He farmed and he created a 0-point energy system. Anyway, I'm losing my light. Got to run. Thank you so much for listening. If you like it, please like it. If you want to subscribe, get the notifications, these things, the second they drop, there's 2 ways to do it. You can actually subscribe here to the YouTube channel, or you can go to our website with the podcast player and just access mkulturaradio.com. And it'll go to the right feed URL and it'll find it for you. But again, thanks for listening. As always, this show is made out of you guys. I hope this is valuable to you. We're just trying to shake apart this thing where we're not even trying. Anyway, take care of yourself, take care of somebody else, and we'll see you in the next episode. Over and out.